In the early morning of the 14th of July, 1648, the parliamentarian forces opened up with cannons on this church tower. Hello and welcome back to my channel. You join me today for a walk around Colchester, Britain's oldest recorded town. In this video we'll look at a battle site, a 300-year-old building with royal connections, and a church that had its tower blown off by cannon fire during the English Civil War. I'm starting my journey here at the ruins of the old Roman church, the first Christian church built in Britain. The Romans had always worshipped pagan gods. However, in the year 313 AD, that all changed. The Emperor Constantine issued a proclamation called the Edict of Milan. This proclamation allowed for religious tolerances, including Christianity, and allowed Christians to openly worship within the Roman Empire. Within 10 years, Christianity had spread to all the corners of the Roman Empire and was now the official religion of Rome. The church probably dates from the year 330. It was a single-storey construction with wooden pillars along the inside supporting the roof. If I'd been standing by this Roman church back in 1648, on Tuesday the 13th of June, I would probably be shocked, because I would be standing in the middle of a battlefield, because this is where the Battle of the Headgate took place. Back in 1648, there were still people who were loyal to King Charles I, and two such people were Sir Charles Lucas and Sir George Lisle. They led an army up from Kent, heading north. They were closely pursued by Thomas Fairfax's new model army. Lucas and Lisle were given shelter for the evening inside the walled town of Colchester. The last thing people of Colchester wanted was a royalist army in their midst, because the town supported Parliament. Sir Thomas Fairfax's army arrived in Colchester the following morning. They wasted no time in attacking the Headgate, the largest of the entrance gates into the walled town of Colchester. The actual site of the battle was just behind me, where the pedestrian crossing is now. As Colchester was a walled town, the Royalist army were able to position themselves on top of the walls and on the Headgate itself and fire at the parliamentarians who were attacking. The noise, the commotion must have been absolutely incredible. The smell of gunpowder in the air and the noise of musket fire. What a sight! The doors to the Headgate were actually open because the Royalists had made a cavalry charge out of the walled town to engage the parliamentarian forces. This allowed the parliamentarians to try and get in, and that's what they tried to do. And actually they succeeded. They actually got a few feet inside the walled town of Colchester, but they were met with resistance from Sir Arthur Capel's foot soldiers. Sir George Lisle had some of his men stationed at St Mary's Church just across the way, and they came down to join in the battle. Sir George Lucas led a cavalry charge down Head Street. The spectacle of that must have been quite amazing to see. The parliamentarian forces were repelled. The doors of the Headgate were firmly closed. And that was the end of the Battle of the Headgate. General Fairfax knew that another attack on Colchester would be futile. He therefore set about what would become an 11-week siege. During the course of the battle, the parliamentarians lost nearly 1,000 men, and only around 30 royalist soldiers were killed. No one's really sure what the Headgate looked like, but archaeologists have discovered two central arches, flanked either side by a guardhouse. and the structure may have had a second floor as well. The Headgate was finally demolished in 1753, 105 years after the battle. But just next door there's an interesting building which dates from 1690. The actual building has just been renovated, so it looks quite new, but it is an old one. It used to belong to Sir Isaac Rebow, who was once the MP for Colchester from 1692 to 1722. He was also the mayor of Colchester in 1716. But this house has royal connections because Sir Isaac Rebow was well connected, and one of his friends was King William III. King William made numerous trips to the continent through Harwich, passing through Colchester on the way, and made numerous stops in Colchester to see his friend Isaac. On one such occasion, Sir Isaac was knighted in this house on the 27th of March 1693. Another interesting fact about this location concerns Colchester tramways, because the first service departed here on the 28th of July 1904, bound for Lexton. Just taking a walk up a side street called Church Walk. This road leads from the Headgate up towards St Mary's, and it's down here that Sir George Lisle would have led his troops down towards the battle. But also up here was a bell foundry in 1648. It was started by a man called Miles Graye, and 3 generations of the Graye family, all called Miles Graye, went on to make bells, not just here in Colchester, but all over Essex. And a lot of those bells are still ringing out in churches today. Even though all the shops are closed today, there's still a tremendous amount of noise from the traffic. But up here on the left, there's a place called Headgate Court, and it's the home of a legal company called Ellison's. But also back in 1648, the surrender of Colchester was signed here on the 27th of August. It was originally built as a private house in 1530 for Thomas Lord Audley, who was also a solicitor. He was also Speaker of the House of Commons and Chancellor to Henry VIII. He lived here for about 10 years, and then it became a pub, or a coaching inn, called the King's Head. For all the history that's actually occurred in this building, it is best remembered for the surrender of Colchester, and there's even a plaque on the front of the house to commemorate that. But what is up here next to all these bus stops is the old post office, which is now the Odeon Cinema, but on the outside there's a little piece of Colchester's history. And somewhere here, if I can find it, just behind me is the remains of a clock. The round disc at the top rather gives it away, but that clock used to be correct to London time. And back in 1847, London time became Greenwich Mean Time. And Greenwich Mean Time, also in Victorian times, became known as railway time, because it was the time measured by which timetables could be accurately written. Gosh, the noise of the traffic is absolutely horrendous today. Skip lorries and buses and delivery vehicles. Very, very difficult to film. But the house on the corner was Gilsons Bakery. The house was actually built in 1698. But Gilson started his business, Nathaniel Gilson, in 1647, elsewhere in Colchester. However, in 1834, the house burnt down, a fire that raged for 3 days. But also up here, in 1648, was another baker's, and that belonged to the Bond family. The father was a man called William Bond, and yes, you've guessed it, his son was called James Bond. And back in 1648, James Bond was Colchester's baker, or one of them. One of the more interesting buildings up here on Church Street is St Mary's House. The house itself dates from 1802. Well, the facade dates from 1802, but the inside was extensively remodelled back in 1971. But back in 1802, the owner of this house was a man called William Mason. And William Mason started off life as a humble scrivener, working for a man called Samuel Enu. But in 1764, Mason branched out into his own business. And that business is actually still going today, and it's known as Ellison's Solicitors. And they're housed in Headgate Court, where we've just come from. But one of Mason's clients was a man called John Constable, the famous painter. And he came here on numerous occasions. And on one of those occasions, he actually painted Mason's daughters in one of the oval windows at the front. Quite a nice story. St Mary's house was named after St Mary's Church, which is next door. And across the way was the old vicarage. But in recent years it's been used by the Mercury Theatre. Although the vicarage that used to be here is no longer here. And it's been replaced by a super extension to the Mercury. So I'm hoping that bigger and better productions will come from the Mercury Theatre. It does look an impressive building from the outside. A lot more space to hold props and wardrobe, which I think is what it was used for beforehand. Next to St Mary's house is the former church of St Mary's at the Walls, or St Mary the Virgin to give the church a proper name. The church closed down in the 1980s and is now Colchester's Arts Centre. First record of a church being built here was in 1206. However, archaeological excavations have revealed Saxon burials in the area, which may indicate that there was a Saxon church here beforehand. The current building dates from 1872 and was built to designs by Sir Arthur Blomfield. Around the base of the church tower are some heraldic shields, which may indicate that the person who actually built the church originally had a lot of money. But it's not the heraldic shields that people come to see here, it's the tower itself and what happened here during the Siege of Colchester. In the early morning of the 14th of July 1648, the Parliamentarian forces opened up with cannons on this church tower. The Royalist army used this as a lookout, and they even put a gun on the top of the tower, a Saker cannon. And the gunner was a man called Jack Thompson. He was an accurate gunner and had already hit many parliamentarian positions with great accuracy. So naturally the parliamentarians wanted him gone. And so they opened up with cannonballs. And the church tower came crashing down. Over 60 were fired at the church tower, destroying most of the nave as well. The church wasn't rebuilt fully until 1714. And those repairs were paid for by Sir Isaac Rebow. A few years ago I wrote the history of this church, talking about the vicars who have served the parish over the past 750 years, and also about the life of the parishioners as well. The book's called Centuries of Change, and it's available from Amazon. I'll put a link in the description below. There's one story associated with this church, and that's the story of Humpty Dumpty. However, there's no historical connection that actually connects the story of Humpty Dumpty to this church, even though the story fits quite well with the fact that Humpty Dumpty, being a cannon, fell off the roof and couldn't be put back together again. But that story didn't actually surface at Colchester until 1956. If you want to read more, then have a look at the book. There's a whole chapter to Humpty Dumpty outlining his story and the fictional connection with St Mary's at the Walls in Colchester. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, give it a thumbs up and a like. and I'll see you on the next adventure. Thanks for watching.